Welcome to another episode of Just Some Points. This week's podcast is dedicated to conscious content, and because of that, Melissa and I have our VP of Publishing with us, who's very passionate about that, and so we want to interview her a little bit about conscious content. So why don't we get going? Before you, Kristen, I didn't really know what conscious content is. Why don't you just explain for everybody what is conscious content?
It's really about awareness and then using language as an art form to use words effectively in a specific contents. What tone and level of formality do you want to use? What are you trying to achieve? Who's your audience? Which words are more applicable than other. There's a lot more thought put into conscious content and who the content is directed to than the way it used to be, especially online. It used to be more about just straight up SEO and getting browsers to pick up your site. So content farms existed, things like that, which was not conscious content at all. And it was much less about the actual audience or the usefulness of the material. But that's not what people wanted, and Google adapted their analytics to account for that. And so today, web writing really has to appeal to people. It has to serve a purpose. It has to be useful. It has to be credible. It has to be quality. So it isn't just about the SEO. It has to have that ability to convey trust, genuineness, and a useful purpose. And it takes a lot of thought to craft words to accomplish that. It's a craft instead of just copying and pasting.
Right,
things.
or just writing. So when you, I remember when I first got introduced to this, when you explained it to us, I remember my brain went right away to political correctness in that direction. But as I understand it, conscious content is not political correctness, meaning you could have very offensive content, which is conscious content, and you're right on that because you understand your audience. Is it correct?
Yes, that's correct. It is not the same as being politically correct, because what you are wanting to elicit a response and engage with your audience. And depending on who your audience is, you're going to tailor your content for that. And sometimes you want to incite a reaction in people. I think just watching the news for 15 minutes would give you an idea of how content is used in very not politically correct ways to elicit certain responses in particular groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you can purposely create content that may have slant or bias. Should you? That's up to you, but it depends on what you're wanting to do with it. So the conscious content is not meant to be, or it's not a bad or a good. It's just literally being conscious about how you are presenting material.
Kristen, how would you say conscious content applies to the creative and design world out there?
So it's not just words that matter, because people are looking at the content on your site as and social media as a whole. So what is in your images, the design, the color, you take into account. So this is where, again, knowing your audience really comes into play. For example, there is a group called the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group that have published web content accessibility guidelines on how to design your website and your content to make it more accessible to people with disabilities. So say your website is about a service dog company, you need to be able to, access these guidelines. Think about people, there is a huge population of people who are colorblind. Depending on how you use color, they may not be able to see at all certain aspects.
Yeah, I'm always the checkpoint for our designs and that, because I'm colorblind too. And then I noticed even within our company how often we use colors that are really not in favor, and that not my favor, because I just can't see it. That's a good example for conscious content and conscious design. You use probably a better word for that.
Right. And you need to research, because like color blindness, there's an enormous population, mostly in men, that have, it's just a common genetic trait that they're colorblind. Your audience is older users. Can they read what can they even see what's in the image? Do they, because if they're doing it on their phone, so you have to think about things like, so your audience is using a phone. How is it going to play out for them there? Are your images inclusive? Are they completely, this is overly simplistic, but think about, so if you're marketing wheelchairs, you don't want to publish a whole bunch of images with people running a race or, something that's completely
I guess the bottom line is, be aware that conscious content or content is not just words. Content is image, picture, it could be a design, it could be video, all of those things. Anything that's content is relevant.
And you can ruin everything you've just said. Say it's a blog or a social media post. You can ruin the best conscious content in the words by having the wrong image that goes with it, because people are going to see that first. And then it doesn't matter what you say.
Actually, wasn't that the image actually you showed me of it was a fashion magazine, or no, a fashion
the turban?
Brand. Yeah, the turban. They use the turban as a fashion accessory, while not really being aware or conscious about the fact that it's really offending, people religiously. Again, if they wanted to offend, then okay, you could argue it's conscious content, but they didn't really want to.
No, they wanted to sell it. So you do not want to. You do not want to offend an entire population of people by stealing their religious symbols.
Again,
so,
it's what's the purpose?
What's the purpose? And it, from my understanding, also where the content is intended to go, like social media versus a website, or two completely different platforms. So do you have any advice on how to incorporate conscious content into your social media strategy?
You have to read. You really have to be, in order to be conscious when putting together content, you have to research. So it's really taking that long form message, and it is very hard to break that down into social media, these small bites that still can accomplish the same thing. So again, making sure that your image matches the goal that you have, and be informed with what's going on. And there are things, okay, so here's an example of email marketing. I received an email from a company that I shop with, and the header and the ad that pops up when you open it says closeout in huge letters, and then in parentheses it says "we mean it" with an exclamation point. So when you're doing social media, we have a tendency to do kind of things like that, like this big, like we only have a few words, so we're going to put a lot of exclamation points or big, and close out, we mean it. I'm like, does that mean every other time you said close out, you didn't really mean they were closeout prices? That was the very first thought that came into my mind. And I was actually irritated by the email, because I felt like, so were you lying every other time you sent a sale email? Because so no, this time we mean it. And we do a lot of, it's easy to fall into marketing speak and not really think about what that means. Like if you're saying, today we celebrate the frontline heroes of the pandemic. Well, are you only celebrating them today? Because it's no, we celebrate them all the time. So think about how you want to craft that message so that it's genuine and not just one of those throwaway things that every company is putting out in their social media.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think on the practical level, I think what most people don't do, and that should be done if you really want to be more, conscious about how you do manage your social media, is we sit down and document and write down, your target group and your tone, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Literally write it down, but just the sheer act of writing down will actually help you. And then also it ensures that if multiple people manage your social media, that they all have a guideline on that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
related to that, without, one of the fears I had at the beginning was, okay, does it paralyze us now? Especially in social media, you want to be, quick and want to be able to react to what's going on. What's a practical approach for a process or for processes so that you don't go overboard in terms of getting paralyzed in your communication? Can you talk to that for a minute?
Yes. You shouldn't worry about not being able to write what you want. What you have to do is define things. So what does your brand exemplify? What does your brand value? What are your company values? You set those out, and your whole team, every employee has to be trained on this and know this is what we value. Be informed. Then you need to define those goals. Again, going back to knowing your audience, who are they? What do they want? Continually research, because you can't produce content that you don't know. If you don't know, you can't put it out there. Then develop your guidelines. Give them. It should be simple. Like, these are words. Don't use these words in posts because they mean this. Follow the accessibility guidelines, and then train your team, but keep it ongoing. So meet periodically, send out updates. It should be a dynamic thing because life changes by the second, and your guidelines and your training have to be adaptive so that you can adapt to what your audience wants. You don't need to be afraid of writing. You just need to have a plan and consistency and training.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, that was very interesting. Thanks a lot, Kristen. I hope everybody thought it's interesting and helpful. And hope you visit us next week. Next week we have another special edition on SEO. Hope you will visit us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.